remember when you used to be able to just book a flight, pack your bag, and be on your way without having to worry about getting a nasal pap smear? Yeah, that was 8 months ago. Kind of feels like at least a decade, right? Little disclaimer before I start on this video. I'm not going to suggest to anyone that they should travel at this point. That is very much a personal decision. I know some people may need to travel for some reason or they just want to. I'm only making this video to provide some information for those people who do want to travel. So, like I said, I'm not here to give medical advice. I'm not here to give life advice. Well, in this video, I may give some life advice later on about other things, but definitely not this. Today, I'm going to be talking about 5 important steps that you'll want to consider if you want to travel in this new normal. Basically, what do you need to keep in mind traveling post COVID-19 pandemic? This is the video. Throughout the video, I'll be mentioning some websites. All of those links you can find in the description below if you choose to go have a look. That's where you can find it. So, step number 1. Check a world map for general travel restrictions. There are probably more than a few different maps out there that you can look at. 2 that I've had a look at myself. First one being the IATA Travel Center map. Basically how it works is it's a map of the world and you can hover around, click on a country, and once you click on it, it'll come up with a bar on the side. It lists several different things, one being if their borders are open at all and who they are open to, whether you need a specific visa to get inside or if you need a certain resident status. And they'll also usually list other requirements, like if you need a COVID test before you get there, or if you need to quarantine upon arrival. Those restrictions will be listed there to the best of the IATA knowledge. So just keep that in mind. It's not a do-all, but it gives you a general idea of what's going on. Another place I've seen this is actually on Skyscanner, which is a search engine for flights that I use myself a lot. Not so much right now, but anyways. On Skyscanner, their map is basically like the IATA one. The only addition that I did notice is that the Skyscanner map that they have through their site also has the most recent number of COVID-19 cases as well as deaths. So if you're looking at planning a trip and that's something you're considering or worried about, then that is another thing that would be nice that you can find on that map. So step 1, check for travel restrictions. Generally, that will give you a start in your search, figuring out where you can go and how you're going to get there. Moving on to step 2, which is check for regional specific restrictions. This one is very important. Everything on this list is important, but this one I think in terms of planning your trip, you really want to make sure that where specifically you're going, what's open there, what can you do there, or are there specific restrictions to you actually going there as opposed to the country as a whole? Because there might be. As an example, in Canada right now, for the past while, mind you, there's been the Atlantic bubble where even other Canadians traveling to the East Coast would then have to quarantine for 2 weeks upon arrival there. So, you know, if you plan a trip to somewhere, you want to go to a specific area, you want to make sure that whatever it is you have planned can follow through properly. So the best place to look for these kinds of things would be either a government website or a specific tourism website for that city or region. I'm not going to list anything on this because I could list hundreds of thousands, so that's not going to make any sense. What does make sense is me telling you that you need to keep this in mind as you're planning your trip, because it would really suck to get somewhere and realize, that historical landmark you really wanted to see is closed to everyone. So you'd probably be bummed if that's kind of why you were going, right? So keep that in mind. Double check regional restrictions as well as the country as a whole. Step 3. What does your insurance cover? Now, maybe some of you are thinking, I didn't even have travel insurance last time I went on a trip. And maybe you didn't, and maybe that worked out all right for you. But this time, you might have to actually look into it. The reason being is that some countries are actually having a specific requirement where you need to have medical insurance that covers a specific amount for COVID-19 related costs and treatments. So, if you're looking at going somewhere and you see that restriction, you're gonna have to get a certain type of travel insurance. That's why this step is important. So, when you're looking at travel insurance, you also want to be extra careful with this, because I have noticed majority of the more popular providers World Nomads, for example, they're not covering COVID-19 related stuff at all. So be a little bit more mindful when you're buying. Make sure if you want to have that coverage that you actually have it. Just something to be more aware of. Since I'm Canadian, I'm going to share 2 providers that I've seen that are actually covering COVID-19 related costs. So if you're going somewhere and you need it, these are 2 options that you could look into. First one is Cover Me by Manulife, and that one covers up to $200,000 for COVID-related medical costs. The second one is Alliance Global Assistance, and that one covers up to $1 million of COVID-related costs, and it actually does offer some coverage for unplanned quarantine if you get a positive test result. So that's a little extra thing that I thought was kind of neat. If you need it, that's one place that you can look. As a whole though, when looking at travel insurance, I usually start with a search engine. For Canadians, you can use Kinetics, and that one you put in your trip information, you put in your personal information, and that'll give you a long list of quotes from different insurance providers. The cool thing about Kinetics right now is that they've actually added a small little note on the side of each quote that tells you if they know that COVID-19 related coverage is included or not. So that'll give you an extra reminder to think, oh, hey, maybe I should look into this if I purchase this one. So cool, right? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Step number 4. Do you need a test before you go? Do you need one after you arrive? Or do you need both? Of course, after doing the research that I mentioned in the first 2 steps, you'll probably already have an idea of what you need to get into the country. There are some places that are also requiring people to get a test upon arrival. Now, I know some airports are offering free testing. That's not always going to be the case, so they may require it, but you might have to pay that out of your own pocket, and you might have to get extra tests as you move from, say, one city to the next or next area. You don't know. Things can change too, so just be really aware when you're planning your trip. I think this step is most important in terms of budget, because if you need a test, who's paying for that test? Does your insurance cover it if you have insurance? That's something you want to keep in mind in terms of budgeting and how much money you are allotting for that trip. So for budgeting for extra tests if you need them. Last step I want to mention, number 5. I feel like this is kind of obvious, but sometimes I think people kind of do things very quickly and they forget. Please, if you are making any bookings, flights, hotels, guest houses, try and make them as flexible as you can. Because, generally we used to be able to plan things pretty well and, tick all our boxes, make sure we're ready and we have everything organized. But it's a little bit harder now because some things may come up a little bit more spontaneously. Let's say, for instance, that you have booked your COVID-19 test 72 hours before your flight, because that's what's required for you upon arrival of your destination, great, you get the test, and what if it comes back positive? Problem. Yeah. So then you're not going to be able to get on your flight, you won't be entering that country, and you won't be staying in any place that you already booked if you had done that beforehand. Number 1, flights, double check cancellation fees as well as change fees. They should list both. Make sure you are aware of what they are for either case. As a whole, actually, I've noticed that almost all airlines that I've looked at have updated their cancellation policies to be a lot more flexible. They don't have those astronomical cancellation fees that they used to have prior to this new normal. So that's great, but I have noticed there are some that don't have those changes, so be aware of this. One example I can give you, Swoop Airlines is one of them. I only mention it because they've been infiltrating my web pages every time I'm on the computer, and so I guess they really want me to go away. I don't know. Back to the point. Swoop Airlines, you actually have to purchase a extra thing. It's called Modify, I believe. So you have to make that additional purchase when you book. Otherwise, you will be charged an extra fee if you end up canceling or needing to change the flight. So just be careful that when you're booking flights, you're looking at all the details because you don't want to get screwed over. Same goes for accommodation. I mean, same idea, right? If you have your test, you get a positive result, you're not going to where you needed to be. Now, are you left with having to pay for your whole booking because it's 72 hours before and that's way past the deadline to cancel? Maybe. You don't want to have to do that. I think probably a lot more places have been more lenient with bookings, but do be careful still, especially with things like Airbnb, because every host on Airbnb will have their own cancellation policies that they get to determine themselves. It's not Airbnb as a whole, this is the policy, so be careful of that. Make sure you're reading that. It's usually pretty clear. I've had to look myself at some of them just to get an idea, and they do make it pretty straightforward, so that's good. The other handy thing about Airbnb, again, they've added a nice little filter that you can actually put on there that filters out listings with flexible cancellation policies, which is nice because you're probably going to want to go with those ones. Well, folks, that's all I have for you today. Take home message: 1, do your research thoroughly. And the second thing, double check anything before you book or buy it. Scrap that, triple check it, okay? I don't want anyone getting screwed over unnecessarily, having to pay extra money for a trip that they're not even going to be able to go on. That would really be crappy. So keep those 2 main things in mind. Again, I'm not here to give advice, and I know there will be a lot of other things that you're going to be thinking about before you make these kinds of plans. This list is not an end-all, but I think it's a really great place to start and will get you on the right path of being prepared for any adventure or travel that you need to go on. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have an awesome week. Much love. Bye.